Enemy scanners pick up a human warship. Order collapsed in seconds. Ghost signal. The observation deck of the command station hummed with its usual rhythmic efficiency. Commander Al stood before the panoramic viewport, his 4 eyes tracking the slow dance of supply vessels moving between the orbital platforms. The station hung in geosynchronous orbit above Prime, a jewel of civilization that had known peace for 300 cycles. He adjusted the ceremonial sash across his thorax, a symbol of his authority as the highest-ranking military officer in the sector. The fabric felt heavier today, though he couldn't explain why. "Commander," the voice came from his sensor officer, a young named Myra's. Her voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. "I'm detecting an anomaly at the edge of the system." Al's secondary eyes swiveled toward her station. "What kind of anomaly?" "I'm not certain." Her clawed fingers danced across the holographic interface. "It appeared 3 minutes ago. The signature is wrong." "Wrong how?" Myra's mandibles clicked together, a gesture of uncertainty. "It's not in our database, not even the old designs. The energy output suggests a vessel, but the configuration makes no sense." Al moved to her station, his boots clicking on the polished floor. Other officers glanced up from their duties, sensing the shift in atmosphere. He'd commanded this station for 15 cycles, and in that time they'd encountered nothing more threatening than the occasional pirate skiff. The holographic display showed a blip at the system's outer edge, near the 6th planet's orbit. Standard procedure said to send a reconnaissance drone. Standard procedure also said unknown vessels were to be challenged and identified. But something in Al's gut, an instinct honed over decades of service, whispered that this was different. "Magnify," he ordered. The image enhanced, but the resolution at this distance was poor. The vessel appeared as little more than a dark shape against the stars, but even that limited view sent a chill through his carapace. It was wrong. The proportions violated every principle of efficient ship design. Too angular, too aggressive. The ship didn't look like it wanted to travel through space, it looked like it wanted to tear space apart. "Send a standard hail," Al said, keeping his voice calm. "All languages demand identification and purpose." Myra's, the communication went out, pulsing across the void at light speed. They would have to wait minutes for a response, given the distance. Al turned to his tactical officer. "Bring point defense systems to standby, quietly. No need to alarm the civilian stations." "Sir," the tactical officer began, "regulations require we notify High Command of any unidentified." "I'm aware of regulations, Officer N." Al's tone was sharp. "But I won't create a panic over what might be a simple sensor ghost or a damaged freighter. Once we have confirmation, we'll follow proper protocol." It was a lie, and they both knew it. That vessel was no freighter. The minutes crawled past. Al pulled up everything he could on his personal display. The unknown ship hadn't moved since first detection. It simply sat there, dark and menacing, as if waiting for something. "Or watching." "Sir," Myra's voice cracked slightly. "The vessel just activated what appears to be a scanning array. High-powered, very high-powered, it's sweeping the inner system." "Are we being scanned?" "Yes, sir, along with every other installation, vessel, and planet in the system." Al's mandibles ground together. This was a deliberate act, not hostile yet, but certainly not friendly. "Analysis of their scanning technology." "Beyond our capabilities, sir. The resolution they're achieving. They're mapping everything. Power systems, defensive installations, population centers. They're learning our entire system in real time." A cold weight settled in Al's thorax. He'd heard stories, whispered in officer academies and late-night discussions among veterans. Stories of ships that appeared without warning at the edges of civilized space. Stories of civilizations that learned too late they'd been judged by unknown eyes. "Send an urgent to High Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha and activate all defense platforms, full power." "Sir, that will take 30 minutes to bring all systems online. The reactors have been in low-power mode for—" "I know how long it takes," Al snapped. "Start now." Across the station, warning klaxons began their low wail. Al watched his crew snap into action, their movements practiced but tinged with confusion. They'd trained for this, but none of them, including him, had ever expected to actually do it. The Empire had been the dominant force in this region for 6 centuries. They'd absorbed smaller civilizations through trade and diplomacy, rarely through force. Their military existed primarily as a deterrent and a peacekeeping force. The last major conflict had ended before Al was born. They were not prepared for war. Sir, Myra's voice rose to a pitch that bordered on panic. The vessel is moving, acceleration. By the ancestors, it's accelerating at rates that should tear any crew apart. Al's 4 eyes locked on the display. The blip that represented the unknown vessel streaked across the hologram, cutting through the outer system like a blade. It was heading toward them. Time to weapons range. At current speed, 18 minutes. Broadcast on all frequencies, Al commanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. This is Commander Al of the Defense Force. Unknown vessel, you are entering sovereign space without authorization. Reduce speed and identify yourself immediately, or we will be forced to respond with military action. The threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. He had 50 defense platforms, 20 patrol craft, and the station's own weapons, against an unknown adversary with technology that apparently exceeded their understanding of physics. The response came faster than it should have. The unknown vessel was still too far away for real-time communication, which meant they'd anticipated the message and prepared their response in advance. The voice that filled the command center was unlike anything Al had ever heard. It spoke in perfect, but the accent was alien, the timbre wrong, as if the speaker's vocal apparatus wasn't designed for the language. This is the UHSV Retribution, 3rd Fleet Terran Expeditionary Force. You have committed acts of war against human territory and human lives. Your government has been given adequate warning. This transmission serves as final notice. Surrender all military command codes and stand down or face immediate military action. Silence fell over the command center like a physical weight. Human, Myra's whispered. What is human? Al's mind raced. He'd never heard the term. A quick search of his database returned nothing. No known species called themselves human. No known territory belonged to them. They must be mistaken, En said. We've committed no acts of war against anyone. But even as the words left the tactical officer's mouth, Al felt something cold settle in his gut. 6 months ago, there had been an incident. A colony ship discovered at the edge of space. The captain had reported unusual life signs aboard, a species they'd never encountered. The ship had been damaged, drifting. The science directorate had taken custody of the vessel. Al had filed a report questioning the decision. The beings aboard that ship had been alive, clearly intelligent. But the directorate claimed salvage rights under ancient laws, and Al had been overruled by politicians who saw opportunity in studying a new species. He'd forgotten about it. His attention had moved on to other matters. Now, watching that hostile blip racing toward his station, Al realized he'd made the worst mistake of his life. "Get me high command," he said quietly. "Get me the science directorate, and someone find out what happened to that colony ship we intercepted 6 months ago." The UHSV Retribution crossed into weapons range 12 minutes later. By then, Al had his answer about the colony ship, and he knew with absolute certainty that everyone on his station was about to die. Part 2, First Contact Protocol. 6 months earlier, the colony ship Bright Hope had been 3 months into its journey to humanity's settlement when catastrophe struck. Sarah had been in the hydroponics bay when the alarms began. She dropped her soil analysis tablet and sprinted for the bridge, her boots pounding against the deck plates. Around her, other colonists emerged from quarters and workstations, their faces painted with confusion and fear. She'd reached the bridge just as Captain brought up the damage reports. "We've lost main power," the captain said, his voice tight but controlled. "Backup systems are failing. I'm reading cascade failures in. Christ, we're losing everything." Sarah pushed through to her engineering station. The holographic display showed their ship like a body under autopsy, red indicators spreading like infection. Whatever had happened, it had hit them hard and fast. "Was it an attack?" someone asked. "Unknown, but we need to fix it fast." Turned to Sarah. "I need options." Sarah's fingers flew across her console. "The primary reactor is offline. I can reroute auxiliary power, but we'll be dead in space. No engines, no weapons, minimal life support. We have maybe 6 hours before carbon dioxide buildup becomes critical. Send a distress signal, all frequencies." Already broadcasting, sir. The next 5 hours had been a nightmare of patching, rerouting, and praying. Sarah had worked with the engineering team to stretch their life support as far as possible. They'd shut down non-essential systems, sealed off damaged sections, and put the colonists into a light sedation to reduce oxygen consumption. When the sensors finally picked up an approaching vessel, Sarah had felt relief flood through her exhausted body. Rescue. They were going to make it. The ship that had appeared on their sensors was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Bright Hope. Its design was elegant, organic somehow, with sweeping curves and what appeared to be crystalline structures integrated into the hull. "Unknown vessel, this is the colony ship Bright Hope," Captain had broadcast. "We are experiencing critical system failures. We have 237 souls aboard, including 53 children. Request immediate assistance." The response had come in a language neither Sarah nor anyone else recognized. The translation software had struggled, producing gibberish and fragments. Then the tractor beam had locked on. Sarah had felt the ship shudder as invisible forces gripped the Bright Hope. Had tried to communicate, tried to explain they needed help, but could maneuver once their systems were repaired. The alien vessel hadn't responded. They'd been pulled into a massive cargo bay. Sarah remembered staring at as their damaged ship was drawn through the cavernous opening. She'd seen other vessels in there, dozens of them from different designs and configurations. Some looked abandoned. Others showed signs of damage. It had looked less like a rescue operation and more like a collection. "Captain," Sarah had said quietly, "I don't think these are the good guys." The aliens had boarded 30 minutes later. They'd cut through the Bright Hope's airlock with tools that seemed to bend metal like clay. Sarah had stood with the other colonists in the main corridor, watching as the beings entered their ship. They'd been tall, easily 8 feet, with 4 eyes arranged across a ridge of bone that served as a forehead. Their bodies were covered in a carapace that looked like polished obsidian, segmented and flexible. Multiple arms, multiple joints in each limb, mandibles that clicked and ground when they communicated. They'd been wearing what Sarah assumed were environmental suits, though they might have been armor. Hard to tell with a completely unknown species. One of them had stepped forward, pointing a device at Captain. A light had scanned the captain from head to toe. Then it had done the same to Sarah and several others. Had raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "We mean no harm. We are colonists, civilians. We request assistance under interstellar salvage protocols." The lead alien had tilted its head, eyes focusing on the captain. Then it had spoken in that strange, clicking language. The device it held had projected a hologram, images that Sarah assumed were meant to communicate. The images had shown the Bright Hope being transported somewhere, being studied, the colonists being examined. "No," had said firmly. "We are not subjects for study. We are sapient beings with rights under." One of the aliens had moved faster than Sarah's eyes could track. It had struck the captain with something that crackled with energy, had collapsed, unconscious before he hit the deck. Sarah had lunged forward, but strong hands, belonging to other colonists, had held her back. "Don't," someone had whispered. "Don't give them a reason." The aliens had methodically moved through the Bright Hope, scanning everything, taking samples. They'd downloaded the ship's computers, every piece of data. They'd treated the colonists like specimens, not people. Sarah had been confined to a small chamber with 20 other humans. They'd been given food, bland, nutritious, carefully calculated to meet their biological needs. They'd been monitored constantly. Medical examinations had been conducted with cold efficiency. But they hadn't been communicated with. Not really. The aliens had treated them like interesting animals, worthy of study but not conversation. Sarah had lost track of time. Days blended together. She'd learned that they were being held on a massive research station, that the aliens called themselves, that they apparently had an entire empire spanning dozens of star systems. She'd also learned that they didn't view humanity as equals. The word their translators finally managed to decipher was closer to specimens or curiosities. Some of the colonists had given up hope. Others had raged against their confinement. Sarah had focused on learning everything she could about their captors. She'd studied the guards, memorized their patrol patterns, analyzed their technology. She'd been planning. 2 months into their captivity, a scientist had made a mistake. During a routine examination, it had left a data tablet unattended. Sarah had been strapped to an examination table, supposedly sedated, but she'd only pretended to take the medication they'd given her. When the scientist had turned away, Sarah had grabbed the tablet. The interface had been incomprehensible at first, but Sarah had a gift for engineering and pattern recognition. She'd worked with the tablet for 90 seconds before the scientist returned and snatched it away. But 90 seconds had been enough. She'd accessed a directory, she'd seen files, and she'd found evidence that they had captured other species before, dozens of them. Some had been returned, some had been lost to experimental complications. They weren't evil, Sarah had realized. They were scientists, exploring the galaxy and studying what they found. But they were also supremacists who didn't believe anyone else in the galaxy was truly equal to them. They took what interested them and justified it through their own cultural lens. Sarah had shared what she'd learned with Captain. They'd made a decision. If they wouldn't listen, they'd have to make them listen. The breakout had happened 3 weeks later. Sarah had managed to override a door lock using techniques she'd observed from watching the guards. 12 colonists had escaped their confinement, moving through the research station's corridors. They'd been stopped within hours. The security forces had been professional, efficient, and overwhelming. But before they'd been recaptured, Sarah's group had accomplished their goal. They'd reached a communication station and sent out an emergency broadcast. The message had been simple: human colony ship captured by alien force. 237 humans held against their will at coordinates data. Species designation. Request immediate assistance. They'd broadcast it on every frequency their equipment could generate. They had shut them down within minutes, but the message had already been sent. Sarah had been thrown into solitary confinement after that. They had been angry. She'd seen genuine emotion in their body language for the first time. She'd violated their protocols, disrupted their operations, potentially endangered their research. But she'd also gotten word out. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, someone would hear that message, and maybe, just maybe, someone would come. Now, locked in her cell, Sarah heard alarms begin to wail throughout the research station. She heard the thunder of many feet running. She heard weapons being charged and orders being shouted in the clicking language. Something was happening. Through the small window in her cell door, Sarah saw scientists and guards rushing past, their body language screaming panic. One of them dropped a data tablet in their haste. Sarah waited until the corridor was clear, then used a makeshift tool she'd constructed from pieces of her cot to override the door lock, a trick she'd learned during her weeks of captivity. The door hissed open. She grabbed the dropped tablet, her fingers shaking as she activated it. The language was still largely incomprehensible to her, but she'd learned enough to navigate basic systems. What she saw made her heart race. A ship had entered the system, a human ship, and according to the tactical displays, it was heading straight for the research station. Sarah smiled for the first time in months. Someone had heard her message, someone had come. Now she just had to stay alive long enough to be rescued. Part 3: Overwhelming Force. Commander Al stared at the tactical display as his worst fears materialized before his eyes. The human warship, the UHSV Retribution, had decelerated to a relative stop just outside maximum weapons range. It hung there in the void, dark and menacing, like a predator studying its prey. "Status of defense platforms?" Al asked. 80% operational, N reported. "Weapons charged and tracking the target, but sir, our intelligence on their defensive capabilities is 0. We're firing blind." "I'm aware." Al pulled up the communication from High Command that had arrived 3 minutes ago. It was brief and utterly unhelpful. "Stall for time. Negotiation team being assembled. Do not engage unless fired upon." Stall for time. As if diplomacy would work when they'd imprisoned members of an unknown species for half a cycle. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," Myra's announced. "Put it through." The holographic projector flickered to life, and Al found himself staring at the first human he'd ever seen. The being was shorter than a bipedal, with only 2 eyes positioned at the front of its head. Its skin was pale with darker patches, possibly decorative or possibly natural variation. It wore a uniform of dark blue with various insignias that probably denoted rank and function. But it was the eyes that caught Al's attention. They were cold and calculating, and they looked at him with an intensity that made his carapace prickle. "Commander Al," the human said, speaking perfect. "I am Admiral Reeves of the United Human Systems Navy. You are in command of the defense forces for this system, correct?" "I am," Al straightened, trying to project authority he didn't feel. "Admiral Reeves, I believe there has been a grave misunderstanding. If you would allow us to—" "6 months ago," Reeves interrupted, "your forces intercepted a human colony ship, the Bright Hope, carrying 237 civilians including children. You took them prisoner and transported them to a research facility in this system. Is this correct?" Al hesitated, denying it would be pointless. Clearly the humans had intelligence. A vessel was found drifting in space, under salvage law, the Science Directorate. "Is this correct?" Reeves repeated, his voice sharp as a blade. "Yes." "Are the humans currently alive and unharmed?" Another hesitation. Al accessed the data he'd pulled from the Science Directorate. Most of the humans were alive, but unharmed was a more complicated question. "They are alive. I cannot speak to their exact condition." Something flickered in Reeves' eyes. "You cannot speak to their exact condition," he repeated slowly. "You've held 237 of my people prisoner for 6 months, and you cannot speak to their exact condition." "Admiral, I personally was not involved in—" "Commander, I'm going to be very clear with you." Reeves leaned forward. "You have 1 hour to transfer all human prisoners to my custody. They will be delivered via automated shuttle to coordinates I will provide. They will be unharmed, or as close to unharmed as possible given your admitted ignorance of their condition. If this deadline is not met, I will consider it an act of continued hostility, and I will respond accordingly." "Admiral, I don't have the authority to—" "Then find someone who does. 1 hour, Commander. I suggest you don't waste it." The transmission ended. Al stood in silence for a long moment. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. He could hear the thrumming of the station's defensive systems, the quiet beeps and chirps of sensor equipment. Outside the viewport, he could see the human warship, still hanging in space like a threat made manifest. "Get me the Science Directorate," he said quietly. "Emergency priority." The connection took 3 minutes, an eternity. When the hologram finally materialized, it showed Director, her carapace marked with the silver patterns of advanced age and scholarship. "Commander, I'm aware of the situation," she said before Al could speak. "The answer is no. We cannot simply release valuable research subjects because an unknown military force makes demands." "Director, they're not making demands. They're giving us an ultimatum, 1 hour or they attack." "Then repel them. That's why we maintain a military, is it not?" Al felt his mandibles clench. "Director, we know nothing about their capabilities. They have technology that exceeds—" "All technology can be understood and countered, Commander. This is basic strategic theory. You have 50 defense platforms and supporting craft. Use them. I will not have centuries of research protocols overturned because someone with weapons makes threats. These aren't research subjects. They're sapient beings with their own civilization, their own military, and apparently the will to use it." "Your opinion is noted, Commander. The research subjects remain under Science Directorate custody. Defend this station. That is an order from High Command which has been on this conversation." The transmission ended. Al stood there, feeling the weight of command settle on him like a physical burden. His crew watched him, waiting. Outside, the human warship waited as well. He thought about the colonists on that ship. Had they been civilians? Had there been children, as the Admiral claimed? He thought about the research protocols that Director defended so vehemently. He'd seen some of the reports. Biological sampling, cognitive testing, stress response analysis. They'd treated sentient beings like laboratory animals. "Commander," N's voice was soft. "Orders, sir." Al made his decision. "Contact the human vessel. Request a private channel. Command authority only." "Sir." "Do it." The connection was established in seconds. Admiral Reeves appeared again, his expression unchanged. "Admiral," Al said quickly, "I'm going to tell you something that will likely end my career, possibly my life. The Science Directorate refuses to release your people. High Command is stalling, likely assembling military forces to converge on this system. I've been ordered to defend this station." Reeves' expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what we did was wrong. I didn't understand that 6 months ago, but I do now. Your people were never subjects for research. They were prisoners, and we had no right to hold them. Al pulled up a file on his console. I'm transmitting the exact location of your people within Research Station Gamma 7. I'm also transmitting the security protocols and access codes you'll need to reach them. You understand this is treason against your own government. I understand I'm choosing between lawful evil and unlawful good. I can live with the consequences. Al straightened. I cannot, in good conscience, allow you to destroy this command station. There are 3,000 here, most of them civilians and support personnel. But I also cannot allow your people to remain in captivity. Reeves studied him for a long moment. You're a good officer, Commander. You remind me of people I've served with. Then don't make me fire on you, Admiral. Give me time to evacuate the research station. Get your people and leave. No shots fired, no lives lost unnecessarily. And if I do that, what happens to you? I'll face whatever consequences come, but perhaps, Al paused, perhaps this doesn't have to be the start of a war. Perhaps it can be the start of something else. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. 30 minutes, Commander. You have 30 minutes to evacuate the research station. After that, I'm sending in my people, and anyone standing in their way becomes a legitimate target. Understood, and Admiral, for what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it. Save your apologies for my people. If they're willing to hear them, that's their choice. The transmission ended. Al turned to his crew. They were staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to admiration to horror. He'd just committed treason. He'd just aided an enemy force. He'd just destroyed everything he'd worked for his entire career. But he'd also done the right thing. You heard the timeline, he said calmly. Contact Research Station Gamma 7. Full evacuation, all non-essential personnel, 30 minutes, move. His crew hesitated for only a moment before jumping into action. Orders were transmitted. Alarms began wailing across the research station, and Al watched as escape pods and shuttles began launching toward the safety of the planet below. He pulled up a private communication channel to Research Station Gamma 7's commander. This is Commander Al. Priority Alpha override. Release all human prisoners from confinement. Do not, I repeat, do not engage incoming human forces. Stand down all security and evacuate. Commander, I don't have authorization to. You have mine, and if that's not enough, consider that in 28 minutes, heavily armed humans are going to breach your station. Would you rather they find their people safely confined in an accessible location, or do you want them cutting through your security forces while searching? There was a pause, then, understood, Commander, releasing prisoners now. Al closed the channel and looked out the viewport. The human warship was moving again, approaching slowly and deliberately. He could see other shapes detaching from it, smaller craft, probably troop transports. Status on the evacuation, he asked. 60% complete, Myra's reported. We'll have everyone off in time. Good, Al settled into his command chair. Now we wait, and we hope the humans are as honorable as I'm gambling they are. The next 28 minutes were the longest of Al's life. Part 4, Recovery. Sarah moved through the research station's corridors with 13 other freed colonists. They'd armed themselves with tools and improvised weapons, anything they could find. They had left in such a hurry that many doors were left open, security protocols abandoned. Something's happening, Captain said, limping slightly from injuries sustained during their captivity. This isn't just an alarm, this is full evacuation. Maybe they decided we're too much trouble to keep, someone muttered. Sarah didn't believe that. She'd seen the panic in the spotty language. They weren't evacuating because of the humans they held prisoner. They were evacuating because of something outside the station. She led the group toward what she hoped was a hangar bay. They'd need a ship, any ship, to escape. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a guard. The alien froze, its 4 eyes widening. Sarah raised the metal bar she carried, ready to fight. But the guard simply stepped aside, mandibles clicking in what might have been a gesture of submission. Go, it said in broken English. Leave, your people coming. Sarah blinked. What? Your military coming for you. We have orders not to engage. Go, please. The guard actually sounded apologetic. Sarah didn't lower her weapon, but she edged past the guard, herding the other colonists forward. They reached the hangar bay 3 minutes later and found it in chaos. Personnel were loading into shuttles, abandoning equipment, fleeing. Through the bay's atmospheric shield, Sarah could see space, and she saw something that made her heart leap into her throat. Ships, human ships. Dozens of them, small and fast, converging on the research station like a swarm of predatory insects. They bore the insignia of the United Human Systems Navy, the same Navy that had been establishing colonies and protecting humanity's expansion into space when the Bright Hope had launched. Someone had come for them. One of the assault ships breached the hangar bay's shield, passing through the energy barrier designed to hold atmosphere while allowing vessels to pass. The craft was sleek and dangerous-looking, bristling with weapons. It touched down with precise grace, and a ramp extended. Marines poured out. Sarah recognized the armor, UHSN combat gear, rated for ship-to-ship assault and boarding actions. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, weapons raised, securing the hangar in seconds. The lead Marine's helmet retracted, revealing a face and sharp eyes. "I'm Lieutenant 3rd Marine Expeditionary. Who's in charge here?" "Captain," the captain said, stepping forward. "Colony ship Bright Hope. We sent a distress signal 6 months ago." "We received it, sir. Took us some time to locate you and mount a response. Are there any more prisoners?" 200 plus, spread throughout the station. "We're sweeping every deck. Medical teams are standing by." Looked at the group. "You folks hurt. Anyone need immediate medical attention?" Sarah looked at her fellow colonists. They were bruised, malnourished, and traumatized, but they were alive. "We can walk," she said, "but Captain needs medical attention. Injuries from?" Interrogation. His expression hardened. "Understood. Corporal, get these people to the retribution. Priority medical." More Marines moved forward, professional and efficient. Sarah found herself being guided toward an assault ship, surrounded by soldiers who looked at her, and the others with barely contained anger and sympathy. As she boarded the ship, Sarah caught a glimpse of other assault teams moving deeper into the research station. They were moving fast, clearly operating off detailed intelligence. Someone had given them maps, codes, information. The assault ship lifted off, and Sarah got her first look at the human warship that had come for them. The UHSV Retribution was magnificent. It hung in space like a cathedral of metal and purpose, easily 5 kilometers long. Its hull was dark, covered in what Sarah recognized as advanced armor plating and ablative shielding. Weapons batteries lined its flanks, rail guns, missile pods, energy cannons. This wasn't an exploration vessel or a colony ship. This was a warship built for one purpose, bringing overwhelming force to bear against enemies of humanity. The assault ship docked in one of the Retribution's many bays, and Sarah stumbled out onto a deck that thrummed with power and purpose. Medical personnel swarmed forward, scanning and treating the colonists with quick efficiency. A doctor, her name tag read Doctor, ran a scanner over Sarah. "You're malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of long-term stress. Any injuries?" "Nothing serious, just," Sarah's voice cracked, "we've been prisoners for 6 months." Doctor's expression softened. "You're safe now, we've got you." Over the next hour, Sarah and the other colonists were treated, fed, and given quarters aboard the Retribution. Sarah couldn't stop shaking. She dreamed of rescue, but part of her had stopped believing it would actually come. A young ensign found her in the medical bay. "Ms. Admiral Reeves would like to speak with you when you're able." Sarah nodded, still processing everything. She followed the ensign through corridors that hummed with controlled activity. Crew members moved with purpose, and Sarah could hear the ship's weapons systems cycling, maintaining readiness. The Admiral's ready room was surprisingly modest. Reeves sat behind a desk made of what looked like real wood, a luxury in space, reviewing holographic displays. He looked up when Sarah entered and gestured to a chair. "Ms., I'm told you were the one who sent the distress signal." "Yes, sir. We managed to breach their communication systems and broadcast on all frequencies." "That broadcast saved lives. It reached a monitoring station 3 months ago. We've been planning this operation since then." Reeves leaned back. "I need to ask, were you and the others mistreated?" Sarah thought carefully. "Physically, we were kept healthy enough to study, but they didn't see us as people. We were specimens. They ran tests, medical scans, psychological evaluations, cognitive assessments. Some of the colonists were injured during initial capture. Captain was beaten when he tried to resist." Reeves' jaw tightened. "I see." "But sir," Sarah continued, Something changed today. When the evacuation order came, they didn't fight us. One guard actually helped us escape. Someone on their side decided to let us go. Commander Al, Reeves said. He's the ranking military officer for this system. He provided intelligence on your location and security protocols. He's also likely facing execution for treason right now. Sarah,